Illegal border crossings have been going up after falling to a 2-year low in June. Border Patrol conducted more than 180,000 migrant apprehensions in August, according to preliminary data. That's almost 50,000 more than in July and 80,000 more than in June. The influx is putting a strain on southern border towns. Migrant shelters in El Paso are operating at or above capacity. San Diego and Douglas, Arizona say they don't have the infrastructure to provide for migrants. For more, let's bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, what more can you tell us about this increase in crossings?
Good evening, John. This is arguably the biggest test yet for the Biden administration's carrots and sticks border strategy. As you know, earlier this year, the administration started this strategy, these web of policies to deter migration by pairing increased opportunities for migrants to enter the country legally with tougher penalties and stricter asylum rules for those who decide to cross into the U.S. illegally. That strategy, they credited that strategy, I should say, for that 2-year drop in apprehensions, that 2-year low in June. But that trend has been completely reversed in the past few weeks, John. In August, as you mentioned, we saw 180,000 migrants being apprehended by Border Patrol, including a record number of families traveling with minor children. And that population historically has always presented these humanitarian and legal challenges for the government because of how hard it is for officials to process and detain minor children. It is also very important that this increase in migration, John, is happening across the Western Hemisphere. We're now seeing record numbers of migrants also cross and transit the notorious Darien Gap in Panama. That is that once impenetrable jungle that connects that country with South America, and it has become a major transit route for many migrants hoping to reach the U.S. I can tell you, John, that the Biden administration is very concerned, but so far they have not announced any additional policies.
So what's the prevailing theory? Is there one for this increase? Is it an increase in reasons that migrants would be seeking asylum, or is it economic conditions? What's the thinking?
Well, I think the demand of migrants hoping to enter the U.S. far exceeds the current slots that they have to enter under these Biden administration programs that allow them to get some sort of legal status here, John. And many of these migrants, including many families, are instead taking the option of using smugglers, coyotes, to enter the country unlawfully. They've also been hearing that many families are being released into the interior with cases that, as you know, John, take years to complete. And that obviously is a major pull factor for desperate families who are looking for a way to increase their livelihoods here in the U.S. and to work. And so that is a major pull factor. And we obviously should not forget that country conditions in places like Haiti, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua still remain very dire, and the conditions there are not improving in any material way.
You mentioned the humanitarian challenges. You reported that one migrant facility has separated families to reduce crowding. What do we know about those separations? How long are they lasting? And obviously, that sounds very similar to the Trump administration family separation policy. How similar is it?
Yes. There is a direct connection, John, between this increase in migration and these separations that were described by a court-appointed federal monitor. He found that Border Patrol officials in one Texas facility had been separating children as young as 8 from their parents to avoid overcrowding. Border Patrol officials told this inspector that they had been separating these children from their parents for several days to avoid overcrowding amid this increase in the arrival of families with children. But it is important to note, however, John, that this is markedly and completely different from what happened under the Trump administration. The Trump administration had a systematic policy, John, of separating migrant children from their parents to deter migration, not to avoid overcrowding. The children were sent to shelters for unaccompanied children while their parents were prosecuted for illegal entry. And those separations lasted months, years, and some of those families, John, still have not been reunited. These separations, the more recent ones, we believe all of those families have been reunited.
And very quickly, Camilo, what are the state and local officials saying they need from the federal government?
It depends on who you ask, John. If you ask Republican governors, they would tell you that the Biden administration has to implement tougher measures along the border, including the so-called Remain in Mexico policy that was enacted under the previous administration to deter migrants and to make sure that there are fewer releases of migrants into the interior, which they see as a major pull factor for migration. If you ask local Democratic politicians, they would like to see the administration send more funds to these localities and also to divert migrants away from cities like New York and Chicago. So there is this national decompression strategy. But again, the Biden administration right now is facing heat, John, from all sides.
Indeed. Camilo Montoya-Galvez in Washington, thank you so much for your reporting.
Thanks, John.